It's a good article from Hot Air called "Can Portland Be Saved?" So many of you say no. Light the fire, let it burn. Same thing about Seattle. We had an explosion in a homeless encampment where a drug dealer was trying to take out 20 people smoking fentanyl in a, lack of a better term, a fentanyl den, right? We used to have opium dens. Now you got a fentanyl den, which is a four-sided tent that they go in there and they pay to smoke fentanyl. I mean, and then when things go sideways, the current, captain of the squad gets ousted. Some kind of drug gang issue goes on, and then they try and, explode the tent, bomb the tent. That's literally what happened. We're talking about those kinds of things going on Washington State Department of Land. I mean, it's just crazy. And then other people are like, a big fire happened. People are like, nah, just keep the fire going. Unfortunately, it didn't take anybody out. So, let that fentanyl crisis keep going. People are so hardcore. So the New York Times published a lengthy and interesting story today about the homeless problem in Portland. The story is titled "Fighting for Anthony, the Struggle to Save Portland." Anthony Saldana is the central character in this tale. He moved to Portland from Las Vegas back in 2018 on the advice of his sister. Anthony got a job at Home Depot and for a while lived alone. Later, he moved in with his sister and her partner. At some point, he began using drugs, and though we're not told exactly why, he eventually moved into a tent. He's probably forced to, right? No job. Somebody kicked him out. His sister kicked him out because she's tired of dealing with his drug addiction and just being basically, super unreliable and just not somebody you want to live with. Most drug addicts aren't. They will steal from you, and they will steal from you blind. As the pandemic wore into 2021, Mr. Saldana left his sister's house and started sleeping outside. He returned regularly for Anthony Day, Mrs. Richardson day off from her job at a local grocery store. She served him meat lovers pizza while he did his laundry and took a shower. In the morning, Mr. Saldana headed back to his tent. He would say goodbye and leave, no hugs or even a fist bump. His sister said Mr. Saldana didn't like to be touched. Mr. Saldana was 4 years old when he went to live with a relative in California who abused him until he was a teenager, his sister said. The last sentence above is the most important one in the story. It explains why Anthony wound up on the street. A young progressive named Jacob Hollenbeck befriended Anthony, and one night Anthony opened up to him about his past. Mr. Saldana told Mr. Hollenbeck about the abuse that he had suffered as a child and how it had shaped his life. He wanted me to know that that's why he lived out on the streets, Mr. Hollenbeck recalled, but he said he couldn't do it much longer. I think a lot of people are stuck in that situation where they don't want to get sober because it's going to be so excruciating getting clean. The drugs folks are taking now are so strong and so hard to get off of. They're so wildly addictive. So they don't want to go into treatment, but they also don't want to keep doing the same thing they're doing. They want to get off, but they don't know how. And we just don't have enough treatment facilities to house everybody that wants to get clean. And we certainly don't have enough, treatment centers or mental health care facilities to help everybody out there that probably needs help, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, right? And that line above is the saddest one. And in March, Hollenbeck stopped by Anthony's tent and called out, asking if he needed anything. No one answered, and Hollenbeck assumed he was sleeping. Nearly 3 weeks later, police found Anthony's body while preparing to move his tent. He had overdosed on fentanyl. His body had been lying there for several weeks. This is not the first time we've heard that story, right? Right before the Mariners, no, not the Mariners, but right before the Major League Baseball held the All-Star game here in Seattle, there was a big cleanup. Hey, let's get the city looking good. We've got Taylor Swift on the way. We've got the All-Star game. We've had all of these events, right? So Seattle went through a big push to kind of get things squared away. And in doing so, I think it was the day or two before the All-Star game, Andrea Suarez took a phone call from a family looking for their family member, and she ended up finding him basically at the entrance to the baseball stadium for the All-Star game. And he'd passed away in his tent quite some time before. A real messy situation. So this is not uncommon. We oftentimes find folks deceased in the homeless encampments. Here in Bellevue the other day, I think it was last week, we had 3 individuals all die in their apartment from a fentanyl overdose. So that whole adage of, all right, if you're going to smoke the fetty, then you need to be, buddy system with somebody else. Well, the 3-pack of people that didn't make it, they were together. They probably had Narcan, between them. But unless you can hit everybody just when the drugs kick in like that, people are just going to die. And that's literally what you've got going on. Anthony was a broken person. His experience of abuse as a child had left him with a lot of pain and didn't know how to deal with other than drugs. He was self-medicating to the point that he couldn't live anywhere but on the street. The person who abused him, however, who that was, really killed him. It just took a long time. And there's a lot of people out there with a lot of mental issues. And then in order to deal with those issues, I think they turn to drugs. And then that just becomes a vicious one-way cycle. People don't just wake up one day and go, you know what? I'm going to tough this one out. I'm just going to, grind this one out. I mean, probably a certain tiny percentage of the population does that. But for the vast majority that you see in the homeless encampments, you go up and ask them, hey, you want to get sober? They'll say like, yeah, but a week down the road, because they don't want to deal with it now. I mean, nobody really wants to get serious because then, life is no fun. And so folks that are on the drug thing, they just want to keep the party going, right? Mrs. Burke, who with her husband opened the boutique hotel in the Old Town neighborhood in 2015, believes that Portland can recover, but it needs to adjust its attitudes towards the homeless. In recent years, she said the city had been too permissive about camping and people using hard drugs in public spaces. Some people respond to carrots and others respond to sticks, Mrs. Burke said. But we have used carrots, we've used carrots before here. What she's saying is that the enticement of something isn't enough to get people to make the needle move, get them off the drugs. Whereas you incarcerate them and shove it down their throats, what their punishment is, then, maybe that's when you go in that direction, right? Here's why I wanted to read this article. Saying this is an affordable housing crisis is an accurate trope. What price for a home would make it affordable? Okay, great question. And fix this situation. Okay, how much affordable housing do we need? To cover everybody. Yeah, way too much, right? We're not doing it. And then what is the definition of affordable? Because no matter how cheap it is, if you're somebody that's on drugs and addicted to drugs, you're not getting a job anytime soon to cover those bills, right? So affordability doesn't really matter. So, what price for your home would make it affordable and fix the situation? $10 a month? $5? Rent could be $5 a month. And most street homeless people would put the $5 up their arm or up their nose and not to their affordable housing landlord. It's like blaming obesity on too many tasty snacks. People would just overeat calories on other food. We cannot fix what we are identifying incorrectly. We blame it on a lack of affordable housing because saying we need personal accountability and tough personal choices to be made isn't nice or sensitive. We need you to up your personal accountability game and voluntarily take yourself to rehab, take yourself to detox. We're going to need you to do that. How do you think that'd go over? Not well. You'd be hearing from the ACLU. You'd be hearing from, right? The whole tough love thing. It's not nice or sensitive, and it's not meant to be. That's the whole thing. But that's why it works, right? Hey, you need to get into treatment. No, you can't leave. No, you can't go home. No, you can't bail out. You got to stay there. And so that's absolutely correct. Anthony had a free place to live with his sister. He couldn't make it work because of the drugs. He couldn't kick the drugs because of his childhood trauma, or even take out the childhood trauma. Somebody gets hooked to drugs, it's just a tough go to get off them because they're so strong and so powerful. So cheaper rent was never going to be enough to save him. Another person gets it. Sometimes you really can't help people. You certainly can't fix them. A person must want to change their circumstances, their habits, their lives. Many, if not most, of the chronically homeless persons are struggling with addiction and or mental health disorders. I think most of them would refuse free housing if they had to follow rules and regulations about that housing. It's about their freedom, independence, and let's face it, being able to buy and use their preferred drugs. Period. So that's why the whole housing thing, you're just literally blowing smoke, right? In other words, they want to live their own life and have the rest of us paid dearly for that choice in a myriad of ways. When does it stop? When do they go to jail, a treatment center, or die? Choose. The most visible example of liberal failures, there is no nice, feel-good way to get people off the streets. Enforcing the law is an unpleasant but necessary aspect to maintaining a civil society. Deny that and you get chaos. And we are seeing chaos. We are watching chaos unfold in front of us. The homeless are clearly victims of something. Abandoned by their own, abused by their own families, or suffering a mental illness, but it certainly isn't high rents. When rents are high, people double up or move further from downtown. They don't decide to live under a bridge. Those are fighting words, aren't they? It's so true though, isn't it? They don't just one day go, you know what? Things are tough. I'm going to go live in a van down by the river. Yeah, as you do. Nah, you struggle and you kick and you fight to keep that roof over your head because that's what you do. I mean, that's just what you do. But whatever the issue, sympathy and understanding cannot translate into allowing them to take over. And that is what they've done in many, many, many areas across the United States. Maybe the answer is more shelters, mental facilities, or those homeless villages. But buying them camping equipment surely does nothing to solve the problem. Yeah, we go on to say a couple more things here, but yeah, nothing crazy there. So yeah, the story of Anthony, super sad, but also not all that uncommon. And I think you'll see more and more of that because there are so many examples of people taking just a small amount of drugs and killing themselves. Smoking fentanyl, just one of the biggest killers now, the biggest killer of the age demographic, 18 to 25, I think male. I mean, it's just literally rocketed out of control. And so this notion that you can build a bunch of housing, put these addicts in it, and everything's going to be fine. I mean, yes, there is something to the notion or idea or proposal that you got to get people stable before you can get them, completely up and functional. I agree with that. The people do need stability, but first and foremost, they need to get off whatever drugs they're on. They need to get the mental health care issues started to look, have that looked at. All right, what do you got? You got, schizophrenia, go down those diagnoses so that they can get the help that they need. But in the meantime, all we're doing is, let's get some more housing together, slap up some more tiny homes. We'll just give a handful of these more out and then expect everything to be okay. Because housing is not going to it's not going to move the needle on this one at all. Because these folks, they either won't take the housing or they won't respect it. And they want to be out on the streets because that's where the drugs are. So if you think that you can get people to move into a tiny, place instead of living on the streets in an encampment without any rules at all, good luck with that. I'd have to say that you're smoking the fetty because, that's just not a realistic, deal. The realistic deal is these people aren't going to go anywhere. They just want to keep doing what they're doing. They're going to tell you to F off And you're just going to have to live with that. So that's why I continuously and always go back to, unless you can get a handle on the addiction and unless you can get a handle on the mental, side of things. And those are just two of the more major issues we see in the homeless encampments pretty regularly. Unless you can get a handle on those, you're kidding yourself that you can build your way out with affordable housing. Period. All right. That's it for me on this one. Thanks so much for being here. I will catch up with you on the next one. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell. Check us out on Reasonable Plus. That's our Discord channel. We got reasonabletv.com. That's the paid subscription site. Thank you again, and I will catch up with you in the next one. Bye for now.